For the first time in 25 years, the 4 cables on which the 2 cable cars run up and down Table Mountain, called the track cables, were replaced. This is done according to international specifications, standards, and timetable. The whole operation takes about 7 weeks to complete, and it's done during Cape Town's midwinter. And it's engineering on a very grand scale. The first phase of the operation involves the transporting of the 4 cables. Each cable weighs 20 tons and they're manufactured in Switzerland. They're shipped out from Switzerland, and on the opening day they are sent to Mountain Aerial Cableway Company, or TMAC, where they are placed outside the lower cableway station and made ready for their eventual change. Along with the 4 cables, there are 7 containers which have been shipped out, each containing machinery, tools and equipment. 8 technicians have been flown out from Switzerland, and working hand in hand with TMAC's crew and technicians, they go about unpacking these containers and placing the equipment exactly where they need to be for when the eventual change starts to happen. While all of this is happening, all of the tools and equipment that can fit into the cable car are sent to the top of the mountain, where a lot of the work is done. The technicians working in all weather conditions go about unloading the cable car and again placing everything exactly where it needs to be, so that when the cable change starts to happen, nothing needs to be moved around and it's exactly where it is. The second phase of the operation begins the work on the 4 track cables, and there are 8 slack rope calipers, which are V-shaped calipers, which are placed along the track cables, and these are used to hold the correct distance between the cables and the right tension within the cables, so that when the cable cars are running, they run smoothly up and down the cables. These need to be removed. For that to happen, technicians climb to the top of the cable car, where they manually disconnect the slack rope calipers, which are lowered onto the roof of the cable car. They're taken down into the lower cable station, where they are completely stripped, checked, resprayed, and then refitted and made ready for their reinsertion later down the line. Once this has happened, the 2 cable cars can be removed from the track ropes, and the cable cars come in 3 parts. There's the cabin, there's the stabilizing arm, and there's the carriage. The carriage sits on the cable. The cabin gets lowered into the lower cableway station, and the stabilizing arm and the carriage get lifted off and shipped off to factories in Pardon Island, where they are completely stripped and checked and refurbished. As most of the work was done during winter, the weather didn't always play its part, and on this specific day was the day that the helicopter was meant to airlift the rest of the machinery to the top of the mountain, but mist and cloud settled around the top station, and for a few days the helicopter wasn't able to lift the gear. But when it did, the helicopter airlifted 2 big generators and 2 massive winches from Tafelberg Road and lifted them up to the top of the mountain, where again they were placed exactly where they needed to be. Because they were so big, these definitely couldn't be moved. And the winches were so big that they were actually sent up in pieces, and they were all assembled by the technicians, as well as the frames that were going to hold the winches in place, because these winches were going to be responsible for handling the 20 tons of cable when they were going to be either released or pulled up the mountain. While all of this is happening, there is a 2-ton mechanical drum that is placed outside the lower cable station. The bottom end of the first cable is released from a 136-ton counterweight block, and it is wrapped around the drum, which will be responsible for pulling the cable in when it is starting to be released. Each cable is 1.5 kilometers in length. The distance between the 2 cable stations is 1.2 kilometers, so the excess of 300 meters is used to secure the cables in place. The cable at the top is released from this counterweight ballard, 200 meters or so, where it is unwrapped, it's disconnected and it's unwrapped, and then it is connected to one of the winch cables by the way of the socket. And the importance of this socket is that this socket will be monitored all the way down the mountain and all the way up the mountain when the cable is released and when the new cable is pulled up. So it's really important that it needs to be visible throughout the journey. Once the first cable starts to be released. It's all about monitoring and checking, and there are technicians that are placed at the top station and at the bottom station that are just watching to make sure everything runs smoothly. In this instance, they were watching to make sure that the socket left the top cable station without any hindrance, and thereafter there are technicians at the bottom looking through binoculars and making sure that everything runs smoothly. Each cable takes anything between 4 to 7 days to completely replace, meaning disconnected, pulled out, and the new one pulled up and connected to both the bottom and the top station. And this can be hindered by adverse weather conditions as well as any challenges that might arise. Once the cable has been pulled out completely, the first cable, the drum is completely moved out of the way, and a new drum with the new cable is placed where it was, and a socket is permanently fitted to the end of the cable. That socket is fitted to the end of the winch cable, and the whole operation gets reversed, and this new cable now gets pulled up. As most of the work, or a lot of the work, was done on the top of the mountain and the cable cars were off the cables, the technicians couldn't walk up and down every day. So there were 4 South African technicians living on top of the mountain along with 4 Swiss technicians, and they went about doing what they had to do, and I was lucky enough to spend 4 days and 4 nights with them. The agenda was that every morning at 5:30 the alarm clocks would go off, and by 6 o'clock we were showered and we were having breakfast, and by 6:30 everybody was out the door, no matter the weather conditions, and beginning to do what they needed to do. And in the 4 days that I was up there, I experienced rain, hail, wind, snow, and sub-zero temperatures. But no matter the conditions, everybody did whatever they needed to do to ensure that the 7-week shutdown met its deadline, and that the tourists would be able to come up and down the mountain again by August, whenever the deadline was going to be ended. Since 2005, I've been the only photographer commissioned to photograph this annual maintenance shutdown, and I'm always blown away by the magnitude and the scale of this operation. But this year I was completely blown away by the commitment, professionalism, and the dedication by all the men and the women involved, working in all weather conditions just to ensure that we can all enjoy a bumpy, free and safe ride to the top of the mountain. Thank you very much.